when the river became a financial highway. It began with a realization so simple that most overlooked it. The Thames was not just a river. It was time, movement, connection, a force that could carry more than ships and cargo. It could carry wealth itself. Long before London grew into a financial capital, the river shaped how money moved, who gained power, and how opportunity flowed. And when the city learned to harness it, the Thames transformed from a natural boundary into a financial engine. London was expanding restlessly. New goods arrived daily. Merchants jostled for position. Wharfside disputes erupted over access, fees, and delays. The city's commerce had outgrown its narrow lanes and crowded markets, yet no one had fully understood that the solution lay in the water that ran through its heart. The Thames had always been a highway for goods. But now, a new idea was forming. Perhaps it could become a highway for finance. To understand why this mattered, we must return to a moment when geography dictated power. Whoever controlled river access controlled trade. Whoever controlled trade controlled wealth. Yet the system was fragmented. Dozens of small docks, competing tolls, inconsistent rules, and inefficiencies that slowed London's rising ambition. Every tide brought not just ships, but questions. Who decides what moves first? Who profits from delays? Who benefits from silence? The reveal began when a group of merchants studied the river with fresh eyes. They noticed patterns others ignored, where traffic stalled, where goods piled up, where inefficiencies turned profit into loss. They saw that the Thames was not chaotic, but mismanaged. If it could be organized, they reasoned, it could accelerate commerce in ways London had never seen. Flow could be transformed into advantage, speed into power. Their first step was small: coordinate arrivals. Instead of ships scrambling for space in unpredictable clusters, they proposed timed unloadings that followed the river's rhythm. Then they encouraged shared storage systems to reduce duplication and waste. Soon they experimented with standardized fees, transparent scheduling, and early mechanisms that resembled modern logistics. Each improvement sharpened the river's pulse. Goods moved faster, delays shortened, disputes eased, and with every adjustment, money followed the movement. Credit extended more reliably, lenders priced agreements more confidently, insurers lowered premiums as risk became more predictable. The Thames had become something new, not just a waterway, but a system where capital flowed as smoothly as a tide. But beneath this transformation, a deeper tension stirred. Efficiency is power, and power rarely rises unnoticed. Those who controlled the old ways sensed a shift. Their influence, once unquestioned, began to erode. The river was changing, and with it, the balance of authority along the waterfront. London was approaching a moment when innovation would collide with tradition, and the Thames would become the stage upon which the city's next great conflict unfolded. As the new systems took hold along the Thames, the river's transformation accelerated. Merchants who had once resigned themselves to delay now watched their goods move with a speed that felt almost revolutionary. Captains arriving from distant ports found unloading smoother, negotiations clearer, and disputes far less common. What had once been a chaotic scramble of barges and shouting wharfmen was becoming a coordinated current that shaped the rhythm of London's economy. But not everyone welcomed this newfound order. The traditional wharf owners, those who had relied on inherited privilege, informal agreements, and opaque fee structures, felt their authority slipping. Their influence had been built on the inefficiencies others endured. Now, with transparency replacing discretion and coordination replacing chaos, they sensed a threat more dangerous than any storm or foreign rival: irrelevance. Tensions surfaced in small but telling ways. Wharf masters refused to adopt the new schedules, claiming they disrupted long-standing customs. Laborers loyal to the old system accused the reformers of undermining their livelihoods. Toll collectors insisted that standardized fees violated rights granted generations earlier. Each protest revealed a deeper fear that control of the river was passing to a new kind of operator, one guided by data, discipline, and collective strategy rather than tradition. As improvement continued, the innovators pushed further. They established shared registries to track cargo in real time. They refined their scheduling methods to reduce bottlenecks at high tide. They even proposed early mechanisms resembling centralized oversight, an idea unthinkable to those who viewed the river as their ancestral domain. Support grew among merchants eager for consistency. Resistance hardened among those who equated change with loss. Soon, the front lines of conflict moved into the city's power circles. Guilds petitioned officials to halt the reforms. Influential families argued that the new river practices threatened the natural order of trade. Reformers countered that the old system strangled growth and left London vulnerable to faster-moving rivals abroad. Debate spilled from counting houses into council chambers, each side framing the river not as water, but as territory. At the same time, financiers observed the transformation with keen interest. Faster movement of goods meant quicker repayment of loans. More predictable schedules meant lower risk for insurers. Organized docks meant fewer costly delays. These advantages tightened the bond between commerce and finance, allowing capital to circulate with unprecedented speed. The river was no longer simply shaping trade. It was reshaping the financial architecture built on top of it. But this strengthening of the financial current carried a hidden cost. As lenders grew more reliant on the river's efficiency, any disruption threatened to send shockwaves through the entire credit network. The old guard understood this leverage. If they could slow the river's flow, even briefly, they could expose the vulnerabilities of the new system and regain the influence they had lost. And with power slipping from their hands, some among the traditionalists were ready to do exactly that. London now stood on the edge of a confrontation with the river itself. Its movement, its management, its meaning became a battleground. The more efficiently the Thames carried wealth, the more fiercely its control was contested. The conflict erupted when the traditional wharf owners, threatened by the rapid rise of the new river systems, decided to push back with coordinated force. Their strategy was simple but devastating: disrupt the flow. If they could slow the Thames, if they could reintroduce the delays that once granted them leverage, they believed merchants would abandon the reforms and return to the old, familiar ways. And so, quietly at first, they began to sabotage the order that had taken root. It started with subtle obstructions. A few wharves refused scheduled unloadings, forcing ships to wait hours beyond their allotted windows. Toll collectors reinstated forgotten customary fees, creating confusion and stalling progress. Labor groups, encouraged by promises from the old guard, abandoned coordinated systems and returned to unpredictable rotations. These disruptions, though small individually, compounded across the river, choking the efficiency the reformers had painstakingly built. Merchants felt the impact immediately. Delays stretched into days. Shipments missed critical markets. Costs that had once been predictable now fluctuated wildly. The carefully tuned rhythm of the Thames faltered, and with it, the financial mechanisms tied to its movement. Lenders, who had grown accustomed to reliable turnaround times, tightened credit. Insurers raised premiums. The smooth current of capital that once mirrored the river's flow began to seize. The reformers were furious. They accused the traditionalists of sabotaging not just trade, but London's future. Public statements denounced the disruptions as deliberate attempts to undermine progress. Tension spilled from the docks into coffee houses, where merchants argued bitterly over whether to continue supporting the reforms or retreat to the old ways for the sake of short-term stability. Yet the deeper fracture ran through the city's financial core. The new system had linked river logistics to credit cycles so tightly that even minor disruptions reverberated through loan books and investment plans. Financiers who had praised the river's transformation now feared its fragility. They questioned whether a system so dependent on constant movement could ever be truly safe. Some withdrew support. Others demanded guarantees the reformers could not provide. Amid this turmoil, the old guard pressed their advantage. They framed the disruptions as proof that the river could not be governed by centralized or coordinated systems. They insisted the Thames had always thrived under local control, fragmented though it was, and that attempts to impose order violated centuries of rights. Their arguments, once dismissed as relics, now gained traction among those suffering under the chaos. The crisis reached a new pitch when several major shipments, stalled by resistance at key docks, triggered contractual defaults across the city. Merchants faced penalties they could not pay. Lenders demanded restitution. Partners blamed one another for losses. The ripple effect exposed how deeply London's financial stability now relied on something as unpredictable as river politics. Desperation shifted the conflict into open confrontation. Reformers attempted to seize control of certain docks through legal channels, prompting the traditionalists to rally forces of their own. Heated debates erupted in council chambers as both sides petitioned for authority. The Crown, sensing the scale of the disruption, considered intervening, an act that would turn a commercial dispute into a matter of state power. The Thames, once the quiet heart of London's prosperity, had become a fault line. Efficiency had collided with tradition. Innovation had collided with privilege. And beneath the crashing waves of conflict lay a deeper question. Could London build a financial system dependent on order when so much of its economic life still flowed through chaos? The city braced for the moment when the struggle for the river would reach its breaking point, and the cost of controlling the Thames would become impossible to ignore. The breaking point arrived when the Crown could no longer ignore the paralysis gripping the river. Reports flooded into council chambers. Ships stranded for days, contracts collapsing under the weight of delays, lenders warning of mounting risk, insurers refusing coverage altogether. The Thames, the artery that kept London alive, had become a battleground, and its turmoil now threatened the stability of the entire city. Officials summoned representatives from both factions. The reformers arrived armed with data, maps, and evidence of deliberate obstruction. The traditionalists arrived armed with history, charters, and the weight of ancestral rights. The chamber crackled with tension. Each side accused the other of endangering London's future. Each insisted that only their vision could restore order. But the Crown, surveying the scale of the damage, knew that compromise would no longer be enough. The climax unfolded when the council presented a proposal neither side had anticipated: the creation of a unified river authority, an institution with the power to regulate access, enforce schedules, standardize fees, and ensure the Thames remained free from manipulation. It was a bold step, one that stripped the traditionalists of their inherited dominance and constrained the reformers within a structure larger than themselves. Both sides erupted in protest. Both saw the decision as a threat to their autonomy, but the evidence was undeniable. The disruptions had destabilized the credit markets. Trade was faltering. London's reputation abroad had dimmed. What had begun as a struggle over docks had escalated into a crisis that endangered the city's claim as a global hub of commerce. The Crown declared that the Thames could no longer be left to fragmented control. The river belonged to the nation, not to any faction. Resistance flared across the waterfront. Some wharves refused compliance. Labor groups attempted to blockade enforcement teams. Reform leaders worried that too heavy a hand would fracture their alliances. Yet the new authority moved steadily, backed by royal mandate and the weight of public necessity. One by one, the docks were brought under unified oversight. Fees were standardized, schedules enforced, records kept. Transparency replaced chaos. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the river began to flow again. Cargo moved with renewed rhythm. Credit loosened as predictability returned. Insurers lowered premiums. Merchants rebuilt confidence. Financiers, seeing the restoration stability, reactivated the channels of capital that had seized during the crisis. The Thames, once a symbol of conflict, became a symbol of coherence, a waterway transformed not only by innovation, but by governance. London emerged from the turmoil changed. The city had discovered that efficiency, no matter how brilliant, could not thrive without structure, that tradition, no matter how proud, could not stand in the way of progress, and that a financial system built on movement required a river as reliable as the tides themselves. In the end, the Thames became more than a source of trade. It became the backbone of a coordinated economic system that would carry London into its next era of growth.